Researcher Lindsay developed a process for increasing the tensile strength measured in gigapixels. So right away, I want to take this between the long dashes and just pull it out of the sentence. It's going to make it easier to read. So Zinn developed a process for increasing the tensile strength of silkworm silk by dissolving and reweaving the silk in a solution of iron metals. I'm going to simplify the list. Comma, Z increased the amount of force required to stretch it from approximately blank to blank. Okay, so what's going on here? This is a process, this is an independent clause, okay? At the end here, we have an independent clause after a comma, which suggests we have a dependent clause in between. So is this going to be a comma dependent clause, comma between two independent clauses? Something like a process for increasing the tensile strength of silkworm silk, comma, by dissolving and reweaving all the way out to essentially before Z. Or no, silk by reweaving everything out. No, after the independent clause, the by, I don't think that's correct. Silk end by, no, I don't think that's right. Silk end by dissolving, no, that's not correct either. It's not going to be adjunct. I think it's going to be a period here. So again, we have to kind of figure out what the right connection is between the clauses here. I think this is going to be independent clause, period, then new sentence, dependent clause starting up front, separated by comma with the independent clause. That's often the case for these types of problems now. So let's read that. Researcher Lindsay developed a process for increasing the tensile strength of silkworm silk, period. New sentence, by dissolving and reweaving the silk in a solution of iron metal ions, comma, Z increased the amount of force required to stretch it from approximately blank to blank. That's your independent clause started by a dependent clause and separated by a period from the previous independent clause. D is going to be the answer. You can kind of run around in circles here between A, B, and C, but once you realize you need a separate sentence for the two separate independent clauses, D becomes the obvious choice. In discussing Mary Shelley's 1818 epistolary novel Frankenstein, literary theorist Spivak directs the reader's attention to the characters of Margaret Saville. As Spivak points out, Saville is not only the protagonist of Shelley's novel, comma or semicolon rather. Let's try the first part. Novel, blank, as recipient the letters that frame the book's narrative, she's the occasion of it. Recipient. So novel, comma, as the recipient. I don't think that's right. I don't think either of these is going to be correct with a comma. Probably in this case, it's going to be a semicolon. Let's just make sure. Semicolon with a conjunctive adverb, comma. As Spivak points out, that's dependent clause. Saville is not the protagonist of Shelley's novel. Independent clause. Okay. Then we have the semicolon. And then I think we're going to have an independent clause. Rather, comma, as the recipient of the letters that frame the book's narrative, comma, she's the occasion of it. That's an independent clause with this dependent clause parenthetical in between, which is why we have that comma there. That's the first opening parenthetical comma, and that's the ending one there. This is correct. C is going to be correct. Semicolon with the conjunctive adverb, comma. Over 20 years ago, in a landmark experiment in the psychology of choice, Professor Sheena Langer set up a jam tasting booth at a grocery store. The number of jams available for tasting varied. Okay, they varied while some shoppers had 24 different options, others only 6, or they varied, colon, and we get a list of how it varied. Some shoppers had 24 different options, others only 6. I think this is going to be the right answer. This looks better. Interestingly, the shoppers with fewer jams to choose from purchased more jam. Okay, so that's kind of separate. I think this is going to be a colon, not while. So we didn't vary it while it was happening, or whereas an alternative. Some shoppers had 24, others only 6. This part here is supporting the idea or explaining or giving an example of how the jams available for tasting varied. That's what's going on, which makes this a good use of a colon. So as we read this again, the number of jams varied for tasting. The number of jams available for tasting varied, colon. Example, some shoppers had 24 different options, comma, others only 6. Doesn't have to be an independent clause after the colon. It can be a dependent clause. That's fine. A is correct. On sunny days, dark rooftops absorb solar energy and convert it to unwanted heat, raising the surrounding air temperature by adding, no, that's not going to be right, by adding a light colored covering to an existing dark roof. Or possibly just comma with a participle adding. Raising the surrounding air temperature by adding colored covering to an existing dark roof, either by attaching prefabricated reflective sheets or spraying on a paint-like coating that helps combat this effect. Okay? What if it were a separate sentence? They raise the temperature on sunny days, solar heat and convert it to unwanted heat, raising the surrounding air temperature. Okay, that's an independent clause. And then adding a light color covering to an existing dark roof, either by attaching it or spraying on paint, helps combat this effect. Helps combat this. This could be, actually. C could be correct here. Let's read it again. Wouldn't be, we know semicolon by adding, no. Could this be a parenthetical surrounding air, adding light cover coloring to an existing dark roof, either by attaching prefabricated reflective sheets or spray paint coating? Helps combat this effect. Let's get rid of this. This is parenthetical, we know for sure. So I want to read it without that. A light color covering to an existing dark roof helps combat this effect. No, I don't think it'll be the comma, actually. It's not going to be a parenthetical participle phrase in between with another one there. I think this is going to have to be a separate sentence, a period. So on sunny days, rooftop absorbs solar energy, converted to unwanted heat, raising the surrounding air temperature, period. Adding a light color covering to an existing dark roof helps this effect. Yeah. I pull out the parenthetical, that makes sense. It's an independent clause. C is going to be our correct answer. We want a period in there. Again, we've got to be very careful about where we separate the clauses. In this case, this is kind of actually typical. It's independent clause, period, dependent clause, comma, and maybe even multiple commas or multiple dependent clauses with another independent clause. This kind of confuses it, the extra dependent clause in there, but you can always pull that out. This seems to be a repetitive structure in answers.